I Am Yellow, White, and a Bit Blue is a novel written by Brady Mikako about her son starting to figure out his identity throughout his teenage years. Yellow symbolizes him and his mother's culture of being Japanese, while white signifies his father's side of being white. Lastly, his own identity and emotion is represented by the color blue to signify worry and fear. This book that I read in class was my turning point in life to consider about my identity. As some of you know, I am born between a Japanese mom and a Chinese dad. I was born in Japan, own a Japanese passport, but I've been living in China for my whole life, studying at an English-speaking school. This scenario might be relatable to some of you here too. You may be born in the US, but moved to China. You may be Korean, but have experience studying at a local Chinese school. Or your parents may be Chinese, but you own a Canadian passport. I can talk on and on about this, so let me get to the point. The point is, how do we figure out our identity and/or nationality when we are associating with different cultures on a daily basis? Which culture do you think you belong, irrespective of your passport, or do you not belong in any? As a teenager who's constantly close with multiple cultures, I find myself being composed from different countries. For example, there is a part of me who is always overreacting, laughing so hard no matter where I am, and always overreacting. I exaggerate everything I say and use the phrase "哎呀" to express my emotions when nothing can be helped. These are from the Chinese side of me. However, when I present strictness in manners, I feel very Japanese. For instance, eating with my mouth closed, lining up my shoes when I take them off, or to never stare at a person for too long. Even little things like using the word "you" towards a teacher makes me feel uncomfortable. I must use them because there is no other way to refer to a person, but it feels so powerful and offensive as a Japanese. It sounds like "you" as if it's directly attacking you. You can literally imagine me writing messages to my teachers at home, trying to avoid using the word "you" as much as possible. Then, there is also an American side of me. I think this identity is pretty obvious. After traveling to Hawaii last summer, I feel like the American side of me is starting to dominate my identity. I found myself loving the vibe there, especially clothing and food. I used to think I could never live without rice for a single day, but American food proved me wrong. It was too good to the point that I forgot the existence of rice for 5 days. Additionally, I loved the unnecessarily sweet American desserts, which I believe most East Asians find it too sweet. In terms of music, I used to be a J-pop master, knowing all the top trends. But now, I listen to English songs often, and I'm not familiar with J-pop anymore, which is very surprising because a lot of my friends used to call me J-pop sensei, which means J-pop teacher. I even started to use beginner level slang like bro, which I never thought of using it before. But sadly, all my friends still tells me that it's weird when I use them. Besides all these cultures that makes me feel like me, there are still a lot of aspects that confuse me on which identity I belong to, especially when it comes to language. Although the nationality on my passport is Japanese, it does not mean that Japanese is my strongest language. I can speak fluent Japanese, however, my reading and writing is not even close to a native Japanese high school student. 日本語めっちゃむずい, which means Japanese is mad hard. As for Chinese, I can speak when I'm relaxed, but once I panic and lose the plot, I can never figure out how to explain myself. The words just stop at the tip of my tongue, and that is why I always use the phrase 我不会说中文 and let my friends ask for what I need. Also, I can read and write very simple Chinese, but I mostly guess the meaning by reading it in Japanese since they have similar characters. And this might be a skill that I should be proud of. On the other hand, English is the language that all my skills are balanced between reading, writing, speaking, and listening, since I was educated using this language. However, there are still mistakes that I make where native English speakers doesn't, such as grammar. Additionally, since my brain thinks in Japanese, there are a lot of times where I cannot explain these minor nuances from my Japanese thoughts to spoken English. In spite of my proficiency in 3 languages, I also have some problems understanding cultures and values. All my life, I have only experienced living in China, but it never meant that I was familiar with Chinese culture like a native Chinese person. Similarly, I am not familiar with Japanese or American culture either. After talking about all these cultures and languages, we can now come up with one question. What makes you belong in a particular nation? Is it the language or the culture? According to National Institution of Health, the definition of sense of belonging to a nation is described by personal involvement, perceived acceptance, sense of commonality, and feeling at home. But everything sounds so broad and unclear. The keywords in this definition, acceptance and commonality, questions if countries are seeking for clones of each other instead of citizens with unique backgrounds. If this was the case, then my cultural background of being associated with Chinese, Japanese, and American culture does not fit in at all. But there is one phrase that I am sure that everyone will agree with, which is the feeling at home. Now, a feeling at home does not necessarily point at belonging to a nation. You can feel at home from a region, a group of people, or even from a specific place. It all depends on you. You have the right to decide who or where you belong to. No one has to be tied up by any nation or culture, and what's important is your values. I value all 3 cultures I am in, and I find myself in all those countries. Maybe your perception of belonging to a nation all depends on where you find you the most, where you have the freedom to express who you are and be proud of your identity. If multiple cultures makes you feel like home, like me, you may not belong in any of those nations, but you belong internationally to any country in the world. If I was to restate the quote that I mentioned at the beginning, I will describe myself as I am yellow, white, and a bit brown. Yellow as an East Asian, white as an American, and a sense of belonging to any color of nation as brown. So keep this in mind. You do you, and you can describe your identity in any color you like. Do not feel afraid to feel far from home, because your nationality does not describe who you are. It's all about where you find yourself. Thank you.